Janet McLean. I work at Family Caregivers of BC, and we are 100% dedicated nonprofit to the well-being of family caregivers. We've been in BC for 27 years and serving as a ministry with a ministry mandate for supportive caregivers throughout BC since 2010. We offer caregiver support through a 1-800 number. We have a website. We offer education such as webinars. We have resource materials on our website. And we also engage caregivers in health system improvement and have them participate in research. So there's all kinds of exciting things happening, and we would encourage you to go on our website. There's ways to sign up for the newsletter. There's ways to indicate your interest for becoming engaged. And we are a BC organization, but we're really pleased that other people are joining us from across the country. So today, we are very fortunate to have Maureen Grant with us, and Maureen has been working with Family Caregivers of BC for around 11 years and has an extensive background in social work here on the island and a range of positions from acute care to community, frontline management, education, so everything from specialized geriatric services, brain injury, complex care, and rehab. So, Maureen, I'm going to let you take it away now. Yeah, welcome everyone.
All right, well, thank you all for attending. It's hoping to cover today is just taking a look at some of the various aspects of caregiving and how you came to be in your role, looking at some strategies you can use to organize and manage your time, and developing an understanding of some goal setting and the use and importance of having guidelines for where you're going on this journey. The other is really looking at maintaining some balance and self-care in the process, because you know, we're all so easily taken up with looking after other people, we don't always pay attention to our own needs here. So I guess the first thing is, you know, how is it that you came to be a caregiver for the person that you're looking after? Lots of times we end up in this role, not always by choice, but sometimes by circumstance. And there can be lots of different reasons why we are caregiving. Sometimes it's an obligation, sometimes it's a desire, sometimes it's both. Oftentimes it's because you happen to be the person closest just geographically to someone who needs care, or it's a longtime friend or family member that, you know, an elderly aunt that you know, always had a good relationship with, or sometimes it can be someone that you don't always have a good relationship with. It can be love, it can be a sense of duty, a feeling that you owe them. Sometimes there aren't a lot of other alternatives available, particularly in smaller communities. That can be a difficulty. Oftentimes feel like we're the only person who can do it, because it's difficult to give up that sense of control that we have sometimes when we're looking after other people. Some noise in the background.
Yeah, if I can just remind everybody, please, to mute your phones by pressing *6. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay. So with caregiving, there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle, right? It's a very complex task, and it certainly involves many aspects of your life. It's not just you've got, you know, one piece here. You're doing the finances, and you're doing the care, and you're, you know, coordinating appointments. So it's important to take a look at what's likely to come up along the way, and to try and you know, set some guidelines and get yourself organized as best you can. And keep a focus on, okay, what is your goal, and how are you going to support yourself in doing that? So I like the idea of thinking of it like a jigsaw puzzle because you kind of fit all the pieces together. The first section that I'm going to talk about is just some of the very practical stuff that oftentimes needs to be sorted out when you're looking after someone. Financial issues, legal issues, medical appointments and specialists and things like that, housing, and support services. So these are just kind of the very simple, basic ones that we always start with, because these are ones that you can actually get a handle on a lot of the time. So number one, take care of the paperwork. Make sure you have a good understanding of the person's financial situation, especially if that hasn't been your role previously. So, you know, where are their bank accounts? What credit cards do they have? Do they owe money? Who looks after their financial affairs? Do you know where the important papers are? Where's the birth certificate? You know, marriage certificate, all of those kinds of things. And, you know, who's paying the bills? How do they get paid? Do you know the passwords? I think I will be in serious trouble if something happens to my husband because I don't know the passwords to his computer programs, and sometimes that can be a real challenge. So, you know, do you have PIN numbers? All of those kinds of things. You want to kind of, you know, try and get this as organized as possible because then if something does happen, you're in a situation where you can go, okay, well, all right, I know that, you know, his niece looked after the finances because she was an accountant and she's been keeping track of the bills, so I can talk to her about X, Y, and Z. Or sometimes you're taking all of this on. So if you haven't been in the role of being the financial guru, then you know, it can be a tough learning curve trying to figure out some of these things. So we also look at things like, you know, is it a good idea to have a joint account? Sometimes what you need to do is, in conjunction with the financial, is look at some of the legal pieces that you may need in the process. Everybody really does need an enduring power of attorney. And what this person does is they have the ability to manage someone's financial affairs on their behalf. So if you have been appointed as the power of attorney, then that is great because if something were to happen and the person can't sign anymore or can't make financial decisions if they have dementia, then you have the ability to take on those responsibilities without it being a very complex process. Powers of attorney can be set up in a lot of different ways. What you want is an enduring one so that if someone is deemed not capable, then it still applies. Some powers of attorneys are set up for specific. We want to have it as a very general one. You can check on the NIDAS registry for more information, and you know, the power of attorney is the core piece that enables you to look after someone's finances. The second one is a committee. So in some instances, if someone's had a sudden and unanticipated stroke, for example, and cannot make their wishes known, and someone has to assume that responsibility, they don't have a power of attorney in place, then the family member or friend needs to apply for comité. So a power of attorney, on average, I'm going to say, is maybe $200 to $300, depending on where you go. A comité is oftentimes around $5,000. So obviously, being on top of it and having a power of attorney is a much more effective and cost less than having to go to comité. Also, things to think about is there a will? Is there an executor? If you die intestate, it makes it that much more difficult. So any of these issues that you kind of perceive as maybe being out there, that someone doesn't have a power of attorney, if you can do anything to get that set up, that is probably the number one thing that will save you a lot of, you know, issues in the long run. Likewise, with medical concerns, there are several ways that medical decisions can be made. You can have a healthcare representative in British Columbia, and this does not necessarily apply throughout the country. Each province has its own rules and regulations, but since I am in BC, this is the program that I'm familiar with. So a healthcare representative is someone who is appointed to make medical decisions on behalf of a person if they're no longer able to make them on their own behalf. If, again, a sudden incident happens and there is no healthcare representative, then the Office of the Public Trustee can appoint a temporary substitute decision maker. And oftentimes that's someone in the family, and it's a, it's a spouse, it's a child, it's a grandparent, a grandchild, something like that. So depending on the situation, the temporary substitute decision maker is someone who is going to be able to make decisions if the person's not capable. It's very helpful to have a medical history, with a list of the current medications, including prescriptions, over-the-counter medications, vitamins, supplements, as well as, some core information in terms of their medical background. So, they had a severe motor vehicle accident in their 20s and, have had ongoing issues with their memory since that time, or, they have osteoarthritis and they've already had compression fractures in their back. If a physician in an urgent situation is looking, it's very handy for them to have a concise background on someone's medical history. So it doesn't have to be, 40 pages, but certainly, a one-page outlining, motor vehicle accident here, stroke at this time, other things that happened, fractured pelvis or whatever. So having that along with, names and contact information for key individuals. So that's the type of thing. And of course, they're going to ask you those questions when you get to emergency. And if you've got it in a nice little binder, then you're much better off than if you're trying to think, okay, well, now what was that surgery that he had 6 years ago, and what was the name of that medication that he was taking for his high blood pressure, and those kinds of things. So if you've got something written down, it's much more helpful than not having it available. Another area that we're looking at is housing. And, hang on, I'm just looking at Janet's note here, right? The webinar on navigating the healthcare system goes into tracking medical history in more detail. So again, there's lots of other webinars on the website that you can check out. In terms of housing, it's always a good idea to be evaluating where you're living, and is that situation working for you and the person receiving care. Are there changes that you need to make it more accessible? Can you modify the layout? The key thing that the physios and OTs are always looking at are scatter rugs and too many big pieces of furniture in a very small room. Sometimes stairs become a difficulty. So if you're in a split level, that can be a problem, or an older house that, you've got to go up 20 stairs to get to the main entrance. So again, take a look at the environment that you're living in, and is that working? Many communities offer a home safety assessment through their community health programs. In BC, it's called the Home and Community Care Program. But it has other names throughout the country. And we have physios and occupational therapists that will go out and do a safety assessment and look at, would a raised toilet seat be helpful? Is there other equipment, a walker, a bath seat to get in and out, those types of things? Or certainly a very basic one is grab bars in the bathroom. sometimes people look at, is it better to move closer to other relatives? Like sometimes if they're living, out of town or, an hour and a half away, is there somewhere closer by that might work for them and for you? And sometimes you can't get people to make those decisions, and you just have to do the best with what you have. But, certainly there are other settings. There's independent living, there are assisted living settings, so you can take a look at where or what might be the best option. So the public health provider in your community who coordinates placements and assisted living and different types of accommodation can often give you some guidelines in terms of what type of care the person might need. And you may not be at that point in the process, because a lot of times, this is a process. It's not a just, this is how it happens. It all goes in this very smooth line. There's a lot of ups and downs, and we're always dealing with individuals. So some choices may be easy for people to make, and others may be very difficult. You may see the value in relocating, but they may not. So it's kind of constantly a balancing act with looking at these types of things. If people have questions, feel free to make a comment in the chat line too, and I will try and address them as we go along. The next area that I want to talk about is support services, because there's a lot of things that you can do to build into a situation to make your life simpler. So take a look at what's available to you in your community. What kind of resources are in the community? Oftentimes the senior centers are an excellent resource. The Family Caregivers Network can answer lots of questions. They can connect with you about what your situation is, give you resource information and referrals to various agencies that might be able to assist. So you can take a look at what kinds of things are in your community. Oftentimes the recreation centers or, again, the seniors activity places will have lots of information on programs that might be valuable. The other thing is that one of the key things is to look at how you get some type of a break, because you too need some respite from looking after someone else. You need to be focusing on your own self-care. So respite can be many things. It could be someone else to do the heavy house cleaning. Maybe it's easy to bring someone in to look after that while you're spending time providing care, or someone can come in and, play bridge or crib or something, and you can go off and go do something with your friends. So respite is a really critical piece of caregiving that as caregivers we often tend to overlook or not pay enough attention to. So think about what a break looks like for you. What would that be? And at a certain point, as someone's health deteriorates and the caregiving becomes higher, home and community care or the, public health service provider in your province will be your next contact in terms of getting an assessment. They also have, when they come out to do an assessment, they also have a wealth of knowledge of other resources, because not all resources are necessarily coming through government programs. Sometimes there's seniors, serving seniors, for example, will provide help with paperwork, applying for benefits, or they, some organizations provide friendly visiting. And so you can connect with either services within the system, the government system, or within your own personal network, as Janet says, or also, community resources. So government resources are usually fairly clear in terms of what they will provide, but what you may need may not fit in that scenario necessarily. So sometimes finding your own private help to meet what you feel is the best thing is the way to go. Okay. So first of all, again, we're going back to some of the practical things here. Being organized is really great because if you have a binder and you keep copies of the information in your binder, then everything is all together in one place when you need it. So, you can grab that if you're on your way to emergency, or you can take it with you to the hospital. You can, you just know you've got one place to look for all of these things. So you can have different sections in it, and it's also a really good thing for when you need to look up information for, other agencies or other contact people, or you think, oh, well, I want to phone their son in England, and, here's his number. Everything's handy. And it's also a good way of, just keeping a record of the names of people that you've spoken to and their phone numbers, because then you go, oh, gee, who was that I talked to on the phone about that service? And then if you can look it up, you go, oh, yeah, right, that was so-and-so. And also, it gives you a little bit of a sequential history of what's been happening. So if you've just got some note pages in there where you can jot down things as you're proceeding, then that's a great thing too. So having a binder or a file folder or whatever works for you is a really great way to keep yourself organized. So the practical pieces are a lot more simple to manage than the emotional pieces of caregiving. Because the practical stuff is oftentimes, okay, well, I've got that done, I've got all these things done. These are things I can plan for. They have a concrete result. The emotional pieces, it's a continuum. It's always trying to work out that, balance on the scale. So you want to be looking a lot at what works for you, like what is going to balance out the time that you're devoting to caregiving by, giving you some quality in your life. And sometimes the caregiving does provide quality because you like to do it, you want to do it, you're there because of, a desire. But at the same time, you cannot do that, and sort of leave behind the rest of your life. And the other thing that kind of floats through this whole thing is the fact that when somebody is declining in their health, you're constantly experiencing grief and loss because, 1 week they can do this and the next week they can't. This week they no longer remember who you are. So there's always these little plateaus or changes that are happening. And so caregiving is often a constant source of losses. So people are losing their abilities. It's very, hard to see them decline. And again, it's that kind of up and down process. So they may have a really good day. They may be enjoying time with you, and then the next time they say, oh, well, who was that lovely lady that came to see me yesterday? And, they don't know that was you. So these are very difficult pieces to come to terms with. And it's good to just recognize that this is part of the process of caregiving. And we are constantly experiencing grief and loss. But we're also at the same time experiencing periods of happiness and joy because we get to spend some quality time with people and, appreciate who that person might have been in our lives. So self-care is, again, the real key to managing the emotional part of caregiving. Looking after yourself, paying attention to the things that you need. If any of you have comments on what you do for self-care, please feel free to add that to the chat box because we do all have our own ways of managing those. with all of these, we're looking at many aspects. So with, the balance in your life, we've got physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual aspects to providing care. We've got, the balance between work and play. We've got family and community. So all of these things are going to be part of what you're thinking about, because it's not just your physical health, right? But you think, okay, what am I doing for my physical health? And what am I doing for my emotional health and my mental health and my spiritual health? How am I balancing my job with my other responsibilities? Am I building in time, to enjoy myself by doing something that I like? Okay. So, for example, Pat said that attending her quilting group once a week is a very good way of having some balance in her life, right? Someone else is saying sleep, because, again, if we're up all night and all day and we're not getting good rest, then our physical and mental and spiritual health are all being affected by that. You guys are sounding like you've got some good ideas here, because obviously Deb is saying exercising, spending time socializing with friends. So you're all already on the path to quality caregiving, because you are looking at doing things that give you joy and pleasure in your life, which provides some balance to the stresses and strains of caregiving. So scrapbooking, quality time with friends, and I think this is a key one. Sonia's mentioning that, being able to talk with other people who have also struggled with illness and difficulties with other family members. If you don't have people like that, there's also support groups through, again, like Family Caregivers of BC or various organizations in your own communities. There's lots of different support, either through for example, the Heart and Stroke Foundation, Caregivers Networks, disease-specific organizations like MS or ALS. So that's great. I'm really pleased that so many of you are already looking at ways of, balancing these things in your life. Okay. And I've talked a bit about the grief and loss. So, again, these things come up on a daily basis, and it's really hard to see the person that you care for going through those changes and not being able to do much about that, because that is part of the process. And again, it's that fluctuating up and down. Sometimes it may be very positive, and other times, you may feel quite disheartened. But again, we're looking for the balance, and all of those things that you guys have mentioned in terms of ways you get support are critical in being able to manage these things. I've spent a lot of time talking about self-care and why it is so important. And really, building in care for yourself should be your primary goal. You want to start early, and you don't want to wait until you are exhausted. So you don't want your fuel tank to be on empty. Caregiver syndrome is something that, is very easy to get caught up in. And basically, what we know about that, slide doesn't seem to be here, is that, family caregivers, oh, hang on, there we go.
It's just graduated.
Okay, thank you. I'm not up on the technology. Okay. Family caregivers often don't, identify because they don't see themselves as providing care. They just see themselves as, helping their mom or whatever. That we focus on who is receiving the care, so the care recipient. And we often say, oh, no, I'm fine, until we hit the crisis and we crash. So we try to avoid that as much as possible. And, it can be difficult because, of course, we tend to put other people's needs ahead of our own. So we do want to, really focus on how critical it is to be providing yourself with care. Okay. So I've just sort of put out a few items here, which are some signs of caregiver stress, some of the more common ones. If we actually look at it, we probably could come up with 50 different ones. You can probably add some to the list if you feel like it. Grace has said that, part of what that about not recognizing you're a caregiver is often the case until you do crash, and then you sort of go, oh my goodness, I'm just coping with an awful lot here. So we do need to take a look at, how we are balancing that. So that's great that, getting information, attending workshops, webinars like this, those are all really good ways of thinking about things and learning about them. So, Janet's saying too that, caregivers who are providing over 10 hours of caregiving a week are at risk of burnout. So, yes, and we do that because we're in relationships and it's easy for us to get caught up in looking after other people and not ourselves. So just a few of the more common signs of caregiver stress. Denial. We oftentimes think, oh, well, no, it's just a temporary thing. They'll be better next week. It's not as bad. We oftentimes need information about what to expect in a process because we don't understand it really well. We don't understand the impacts. Frequently, we have anger, and it's not always directed at the person we're providing care for, but it can be. But oftentimes, other family members, we can get irritable. We withdraw socially. We don't go to our quilting group or whatever activities that we enjoy because it's almost like we feel, how can I have something good happening in my life when there's, it's so challenging. So it's something to watch out for. Are you withdrawing and are you isolating? We can have a lot of anxiety about the future, and this is because it is unknown. We can plan for some of the very basic things, but we don't know what will happen. So one of my favorite expressions that I oftentimes use when I talk about, that sleeplessness, the exhaustion, the depression, is to wait to worry, because we can, worry about all types of things that may never happen in a situation, and yet something unexpected will happen that, we hadn't even thought about. So, we can spend a lot of time worrying about things which are not actually ever going to happen. So if you can, try to focus on not worrying about things and not sort of pre-planning what might happen, that's great. So, oftentimes you may find that you're starting to feel a bit of depression, you're exhausted, you're not sleeping well. We can have emotional reactions. Our memory can we can forget things, have a lack of concentration. Those are just a few of the things that we find in caregiving. So we want to be looking as much as we can at looking after ourselves. Okay. So again, just another little quick poll here. How many of you have signs of stress? And that's just my list, but I mean, if you have other signs of stress that you know, then that is something else that you can look at, right? So, yeah, so I mean, it can be a real struggle, the process of caregiving, but it has a lot of rewards as well. So again, we want to have that balance. If we can recognize where we're having difficulty, we can get help with that. And if we know what it is, then we can talk to other people. And certainly we we do need to keep informing the professional community about what the struggle that caregivers have is all about, because so often, they go, oh, well, no, that's okay. Their wife will look after them when they send them home from emergency. And they have no idea that, the wife might be 80 years old herself and have her own health issues. So, the system can make a lot of assumptions about families and caregiving, and not have any recognition that, the daughter may work full-time and have a very stressful job and have, varying schedules, and, they think, oh, well, she can do the medications or whatever. We need to be very clear with them about what is possible and what isn't. So thank you guys for adding those pieces to the discussion. Okay. I'd like to move on and just talk briefly about goals. And I have a quote here from Brian Tracy. Goals allow you to control the direction of change in your favor. So when you have, a guideline or some guideposts that you're heading for, you can make choices, right? You can create a situation where you have some control over what might happen in the future. And goals are SMART. And that's just an acronym for simple, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So those are the key components of a good goal. So not to make your goal very complex. If you want it to be just set up in a way that they will work for you. And sometimes, again, one of the participants is saying that it's hard to set goals when every day is different. But the goal may not be so much around what's happening with the caregiver, but it might be a goal that you're looking at. So because every day is different, I am going to do these things which I know will make me feel a little bit better about the situation. But again, they're guidelines, they're not set in stone, and they can go up and down. Okay. Just a second, sorry, I'm just getting my little arrow there. Okay, so I talked a little bit on the worksheets. I have some sample goals, right, and things that might be things you want to work on. Sometimes it might be very simple things. It might be, I want to get a power of attorney. So on the worksheet, I've just got a bunch of headings, and you can just jot down some of the things that you want to do, or just right now you can just sit there and just sort of think, oh yeah, okay, these are the 3 things that I'm thinking about. The Family Caregivers of BC also have some information on brief action planning, which is another strategy for working on setting some goals. So sometimes getting some help with some of that is a good way to do it, right? And the handouts are going to go out tomorrow in the email. So, it might be just another way of kind of refreshing things and giving you some time to think about that. So when we're looking at setting goals, right, we want to set something to do. So and then, these are just, this sheet here just outlines different ways that you can think of the goal and what's worked for you in the past, what works for you now, what's going to get in the way of you reaching your goal, what it is you want to focus on, and what are the steps that you need to take to achieve it. Who can help you with this, and who can you discuss those goals with? So I've done some very simple goal setting with a few girlfriends of mine, and we talked about, we wanted to get more fit, right? So, we all know, we say, all right, well, I want to do this. Yeah, I got to get more in shape. I've got to lose weight. I've got to do whatever. That's just way too general, when you're looking at setting a goal. What you need to do is set something specific. So I'm going to try to go for a walk twice a week. What's going to get in the way of that? Well, unexpected dinner invitations, all kinds of things. But, you can set your goal, and then oftentimes if you have someone to do something with, it's more effective. If you set yourself some deadlines and some targets, so if it's, okay, I really want to get a power of attorney done for myself, and I really need to get my will done. So that may be your general goal, but what you will do is you will get more specific in terms of, okay, what I'm going to do now is I am going to phone the lawyer's office today or by the end of the week to set up an appointment, because that then gets the process going. So if you have a very small concrete, it will be much more effective than just having a generalized statement. So think about it in that way, and try to break those things down into the various components. That will help you with getting there. Okay. Okay. And as one of the was saying, that it's hard to set goals when every day is different, right? Planning for care when the goalposts keep moving, I think, is probably addressing that pretty concretely here, right? Because we all know that change is inevitable and constant. So even the best laid plans can be disrupted because people's health issues change. So we don't always know what's going to happen, but if we have a strategy in place for, okay, well, we just have to deal with this now. So what are going to be the steps that I take to deal with this? If this happens, then I'll try this. If that doesn't work, then I'll move on to that. I can talk to other people and see how they managed it. Mahatma Gandhi said, adversity is the mother of progress, because it's amazing how creative as caregivers you can become when you're trying to figure out a strategy to deal with a complex behavior or a certain type of physical care, how to motivate someone, all of those kinds of things, how to deal with, violent behavior or changes in personality. Caregivers are incredibly adept at figuring out, far better than professionals sometimes, what is going to work with my mom here. I know that she responds to the cat, therefore I'll, when she starts to get agitated, I'll bring her the cat, or we'll talk about the cat, or we'll get the caregiver to discuss the cat, or whatever it is, right? So the key, I think, too, is that what we need to do is always be flexible. So there's a Chinese proverb, and it says, a wise man adapts himself to circumstances as water shapes itself to the vessel that contains it. So again, go with the flow, be fluid, try not to get too rigid in your ways of doing things, because inevitably something will happen that will muck up your plan. So if you can just go, all right, well, there's no sense in getting totally stressed out about the flat tire. What do I need to do about that? I need to do, I need to call the mechanic and BCAA, and I need to do X, Y, and Z. So, you may have to cancel the visit, rebook it. Those kinds of things happen in our lives all the time. And if we stress about them, we're not going to be doing ourselves a favor. If we find ways of adapting to the circumstances, then we can keep moving forward. So those are the kinds of things that we need to be looking at here. So one of the things that Janet's been saying is, start small, one step at a time. Again, just pick a small item and work on that as a goal, because this is a journey. It's not, we don't necessarily know which way it's going to go, and there's going to be some detours on the journey. It's not a straight line. There's ups and downs. There's all kinds of things that can happen along the way. So I think a lot of the times the key is to be looking at what it is that you can do to find your way through the process. What is it that you find helpful? What is it that works for you? Because everybody is different, and everybody experiences this journey in a slightly different manner. So what we're going to do is say, okay, well, I really find that if I do this, and I'm able to get that break, to go play bridge, then I will be able to manage better, because it keeps me in a better frame of mind. So every one of us is going to have our own way to deal with this. So I'm just thinking, if people have any ideas or suggestions, we've got a little bit of time, and I'm happy to respond to anything that you have questions about or comments about, so that we can, take a look at these kinds of things. Okay. Or the other thing is, what is it that, what one idea out of the webinar today that strikes you as something you might want to do or try? Because, other people have other great ideas, right? One person has asked if there's an organization in Ontario which is similar to the Family Caregivers of BC. Many provinces have different programs, and I believe that Janet and the Family Caregivers Network can direct you into, they would have information on programs across the country. So,
yes, so Werner, I don't know that there's a provincial organization in Ontario. There is one in Alberta and in Nova Scotia, as well as in BC, but I'm positive that there would be some equivalent, even just locally within a certain geography.
All right. And, one of the other comments is that, the thinking about the goal setting in terms of the SMART, simple, measurable, realistic, timely, so, keeping that in mind when you're setting your goals is a good one. Okay, right. Creating a central binder is another, again, excellent way of starting the process, because those simple things, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but in the long run, it can save you a lot of heartache and headache. So, yeah. So, again, these are just simple ideas that have worked well for people in the past, and I know from having met with many clients, they come in and it's okay, well, now who, what's the phone number of, your brother in Nova Scotia? And, if they've got it there, it's great, and it just takes a minute. But if you don't have that information handy, you spend a lot of time and use a lot of your energy looking for it, right? Okay. Humor, excellent idea. I did not mention that when I suggested joy, but yes, humor is, sometimes having a good laugh about the craziness of some days is the best way to cope. And being able to get out and see friends and, talk about something different, or all of those things are really helpful. And sometimes, the other idea, I think, is the Family Caregivers Network of BC have, a phone-in line that you can call and just talk to somebody there. Because if you're pulling your hair out, then they can say, well, did you know about this? Or what about that? So okay. I'm just trying to read here while I'm talking, which is kind of hard for me. Yes. Making sure other family members know what's going on and where to find out the important paperwork, as well as, caregivers too, if it's something that's relevant to them.
Somebody mentioned using a USB. That's a great idea. Like if you have all of the information on your laptop, you can put it on USBs for the people who might need to know. Great idea.
Yes, and it's also a really good way of involving other members of the family in the process, because sometimes what happens is if you're the person who's local and available, they don't always understand exactly what's happening. So keeping everybody in the loop with emails is another good way of trying to delegate, or also saying to other family members, okay, well, this is what's happening. I need someone else to do X. And that will make a difference too. So those are all really good ideas. And if you can divvy up that work or find some external people, if you have a tight family and good siblings and everybody's working on it together, that is great. Not everybody has that. If you're an only child, then you may not have that level of support available, but there are other programs and other services, and you build it in one way or another, for sure. That's a great idea. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that people.
Someone also mentioned family blogs. It's another really great idea.
Yeah. Well, and I think again with the access we have with computers these days, it does make a difference in terms of spreading the news. So
yeah.
I know with varying groups, we've got our little emails and things which suddenly everybody knows what's going on, or and people can then participate and help out. So it's really great when you guys have so many good ideas. So that's good. So thank you all for coming today. I've enjoyed our presentation, and we've got a couple of minutes left. So Janet, if you've got anything else that you want to add in, or
yeah, well, I just want to say that it's been great to have all of you sign on, and clearly this is a good time for lots of people, which is a good thing to know. And I would just encourage all of you to go to the Family Caregivers website. You can see it at the bottom of the last slide, and check out upcoming webinars, because we do have webinars on grief and loss, on advanced care planning, and also how to build a support network, all of which would relate very well to today's webinar. So it's great that you took the time for yourself to attend this webinar. That's an important step, and I'm really pleased to hear all of the different things that you're all doing to look after yourselves. And obviously, you're on your journey, and hopefully today's webinar helped you with some ideas. So appreciate all of you coming out, giving us your time, and I will be sending an email out with an evaluation. We really, really hope that you will complete the evaluation and give us any feedback. We want to make this as useful for you as possible. So thanks so much, Maureen, and thanks everybody for coming out.
Right. And I just want to address Sandra's comment too about dealing with clients with Alzheimer's and dementia. There's a lot of support through the Alzheimer's Society in that area, and certainly it is becoming much more evident, and people are much more aware of the challenges that we have. But again, education in terms of what's happening with family members is also a really good way of moving things forward. So thanks for mentioning that, Sandra.
Yeah.
And thank you all. I appreciate you all taking the time and all your wonderful comments. And we really hope that you have some new ideas in terms of managing on your own individual journeys. So thank you again very much. Got a couple more comments.
Yeah, I see those. I'm typing too.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the one last thing is that, the Family Caregivers of BC have just an incredible array of resources available to you. There are hundreds of, presentations and many, many webinars that they've done in the past. So there's lots of things. So even if, a webinar like this and the time doesn't work, you can always go online and find something that you can download at your own and just do it yourself. So
Yeah, your own convenience. That's absolutely right.
yeah.
Okay, well, again, thanks, Maureen, and thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
In the green, what does it say?